Senator, great to see you today.
Thank you, Contessa.
How bad are things on Capitol Hill when we get down to the wire like this on default, you know, a day before the deadline, and still there are a lot of staunch conservatives and staunch Democrats who say they will not vote to support this bill?
Well, I think that is what compromise is. The people on the edges are not happy with it on both ends of the spectrum, but I do think that it is a major step forward in the right direction, or maybe a small step forward in the right direction.
And how will you vote on this legislation?
I will support it. It isn't everything I wanted, for sure. I'd like to have seen entitlement reform in it, but I do think that the hope is that the commission, the committee that would have to report and be acted on before the end of the year, can tackle entitlement reform. And there are triggers that are the key here that assure that we will get the $2 trillion at least.
We heard that from the press secretary as well, telling reporters that that's one way that we can be sure we're not going to see this kind of standoff, this kind of impasse again. And yet you would think that the threat of default, the warnings that our credit would be downgraded, that would be enough of a trigger too, and yet we saw a standoff and an impasse.
Well, it was very difficult because of the different philosophies that we have about government. I think that what America got from this is the assurance that we're not going to have new taxes in this hard economic time, and there is a trigger mechanism that will assure that there are real spending cuts. And that is something I hope we can add to. The long term means we're going to have entitlement reform, and I think we're coming to more of a consensus on that. And I hope that we will be able to show that by the end of the year. Senator
McCain had some harsh words for the Tea Party members in the House and their ability to co-opt the legislation and stand in the way of an original compromise deal. How would you characterize the Tea Party's influence for the Republican Party?
Well, I'm really encouraged that so many people swelled up from the grassroots and said enough is enough. We are losing the principles of our country that our country was built on, and that's what the Tea Party represents. So I think they changed the dynamic in the right direction. And at some point then we have to come together and say, okay, they made a big impact, and now let's move forward and keep going in this direction in a more bold way, which is my hope.
But they made the debt ceiling, the nation's finances, the nation's debt overall, the prime policy concern. They guided the discussion. They stood in the way of, as I said, the original Boehner deal, and now they're still saying they're not going to vote for the deal. I mean, I guess they got elected on this whole government doesn't work theme, and then they got to government and made sure that it didn't work.
Well, the one thing that we all have to realize is that we are 1 out of 100 on our side and 1 out of 435 on the other side, so we can't dictate exactly what we want. But I do think that they have made a positive impact in changing the dynamic against tax increases, which have happened, and with real spending cuts that have triggers that require a sequestration. So I believe that the overall impact is positive, even though many of them are not happy, as maybe none of us are, with the final result.
Senator, so glad that you could be with us today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Contessa.
President Obama is getting a lot of scrutiny.